Hello and welcome to TTEC's Facebook Live today in celebration of Women's Equality Day in the USA. I'm Monica Alvarez Cunningham in Tampa, Florida. If you're joining us, I'd love to know where you're joining us from, so please place it in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from today. Now, I'm really excited to be moderating this really important conversation with today's panel. It's brought to you in partnership with TTEC's Women in Leadership Group. But before I introduce them, I'd like to give you some context around what it is that we're celebrating. Women's Equality Day was established in the United States to celebrate the adoption of the 19th Amendment. The 19th Amendment prohibits the federal government and the states from denying anyone the right to vote on the basis of sex. With that said, it's important to celebrate today with inclusivity in mind. Women include all self-identifying women, and that means cisgender, trans, non-binary, and others on the gender spectrum. And it's also important to remember that when the 19th Amendment was passed, Black women and other women of color were still disenfranchised until the passage of the Civil Rights Act. Every woman faces unique challenges in the fight for equality, and our work is never done. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce you to our panel for today. First, we have Sarah Klaas, Executive VP of Human Resources at Avtex, a TTEC digital company, Ebony Langston, TTEC's VP of Digital Sales, Kelsey Marler, a TTEC Senior Manager within Service Delivery, and Colleen Ritchie, TTEC Senior VP of Operations. Now, thank you all for joining us today. And beginning with Sarah, can you introduce yourself and let us know about your TTEC journey?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm actually just beginning my TTEC journey as Avtex was acquired by TTEC earlier this spring, but I've been lucky to be in leadership and HR at Avtex since 2014. I'm really excited to see all we can accomplish together.
Thank you, Sarah. And Ebony, can you talk to us about your career at TTEC?
Sure, absolutely. So I've been a part of TTEC for the last 4 years. I actually also came in with an acquisition of a company called Connections in 2017. And it's been a really great journey. Today, I work within the healthcare sales team. And, we look to partner with payers, providers, pharmacy benefit companies, and helping them improve the patient and member experience.
Thank you, Ebony. Kelsey, can you tell us about yourself and your TTEC journey?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I've been with TTEC for 11 years. I actually started whenever I was 18, started whenever I was an agent on the phones. I helped represent the USA program. So I have kind of moved my way up, helped travel and help ramp and launch a few sites. So senior manager now and excited.
Thank you, Kelsey. And Colleen, we'd love to know more about you and your career at TTEC.
Yeah, well, it's been a long one. So I've been here over 20 years, in various positions. And I now have the honor of working with all of our support organizations, from facilities to process improvement to product launch. It's been a great journey. About 6 years ago, I helped with some other lovely women of Teletech found our Women in Leadership organization, which has since grown and really taken off to help provide forums of empowerment, leadership, mentorship for women in our company. And this year, I lead our Diversity Council. And so a lot of really great, passionate projects that really speak to, I think, the culture and the values of our company. So excited to be here today and really excited to be working on the things that I'm working on.
Thank you for that. And as a member of Women in Leadership myself, I'm super grateful for everything they did to support this today. So let's get to the first question. And Ebony, I'm going to start with you. Why is Women's Equality Day important to you?
I think it's a really great opportunity to take a moment to celebrate all that we've accomplished in the last 100 or so years. I mean, in the history of civilization, 100 years is not that long of a time. So it's definitely been a lot accomplished in that time frame. But also take a moment to acknowledge that the work isn't done. There's still work to go, especially when you start to dissect the gaps between women of color, as you talked about before. So, it's a day of celebration, but also a day to acknowledge that there's still some opportunities and we should still keep fighting for it.
Thank you for that, Ebony. What about you, Colleen? Why is it important to you?
Well, I think very similar to Ebony, come a long way, but we have a long way to go. I have a 92-year-old mother, and I'm always very grounded when I speak to her because her perspective on things is so different than mine just because of our generation gap. But, you know, I'm a runner, and, you know, to her, that's so crazy. They weren't allowed to run. You know, your uterus would fall out. They didn't have gym for women. The fact that I could have a career and children, just very foreign to her. So I'm always very grateful looking at what's changed in my lifetime compared to hers. But then I look at my daughter, who's a female engineer and one of the only ones in her office, and some of the things that happen to her every day at work, being in a career that's predominantly dominated by men. And I realize that, you know, while we have a lot to celebrate, we have a lot to work on. And, you know, I think having forums like this and being dedicated to continuing to challenge what's happening on a daily basis, whether it's for women of color, women, you know, just in general, just speaking up and speaking out on what we can do differently is so important. So that's what this day really means to me.
Thank you, Colleen. And Kelsey, how about you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I would definitely echo, you know, just the fact that we've come so far, but we still have a lot of work to do. And so this day is so important to me, Women's Equality Day, because of the educational opportunity. I have so many friends with so many different backgrounds, as you mentioned, whether, you know, they have a different race or religion. And we just still have so much more of a path to go down. And so for me, it's taking the opportunity to celebrate how far we've come, but also take a step back and reflect on what can we do to educate the current, you know, population, and then look for ways to improve as we move forward in our future.
Thank you for that, Kelsey. Very well said. And Sarah, what would you like to add? Oh, I think you're muted. Oh.
Sorry about that. Much like the other women on the panel, you know, today is a day of celebration. And for me, it highlights how important it is to continue to make our voices heard. We as women can be heard with our votes and within the workplace. You know, Colleen spoke to how things have changed throughout generations. And it's important that we continue using our voices to make progress, to advocate and take action toward change for groups who don't have the same equal rights as we do today.
Well, thank you all for those insightful answers. We did pose this question to our employees around the USA, and we received some great responses to which you can find on our social media pages. So definitely encourage you to check out our TTEC YouTube page to hear more about, you know, their thoughts on today. So next, I'm going to throw this question out to the audience too. So let us know in the chat. But the question I'd like to ask you, and Ebony, I'll start with you, is I'd love to know who are some of the self-identifying women you look up to, either in your personal life or in your career.
I'm grateful to have a lot of very successful, empowering women around me. My mom was a college graduate. My friends are all very successful, but I don't know them personally, but one of the people I really look up to right now is Bosma St. John, who's the CMO at Netflix, just for her ability to really be authentic in a corporate environment, and it's inspiring to see.
Yeah, she's one of my favorites too. Okay, Colleen, what about you? Who's the woman that you've looked up to?
Well, luckily, I've had a lot of folks to look up to in my personal life. I've really actually never, I think only once in my career, I reported directly to a woman, but I would say that the person I really look up to is my oldest sister. You know, she's 70s, in her early 70s right now. And she was born with a birth defect. She didn't have all of her fingers. And at that time, you know, that was, you know, really could be something where people would just sit and say you couldn't do it. But she was one of the first people to graduate from college in our family. She went on to earn her, you know, administration for hospitals and became one of the directors of the LA VA hospital before she retired. So she had this hugely successful career and really based on resilience. Right? Things weren't easy. She was one of the first females. She didn't, you know, she obviously had this birth defect, and it just always made me realize, like, you can do whatever you want to do. It may not be easy. but you can just keep showing up every single day, and don't let people bring you down, telling you can't do something or you shouldn't do something because you're either not qualified or you have a birth defect or you're not educated enough or you didn't come from the right place. None of that stuff is true, and you can really write your own story. And so I often think of her a lot in that way when I'm like coming up with things that, a couple of years ago, they said, hey, do you want to take over the construction organization? And, obviously my first thought was, no, I can't do that. I'm not, don't have a lot of experience or any experience in construction, but I didn't. I said, sure. And I figured it out and got good people to help me. So I think, that's somebody that I really look up to because she had a lot to overcome and she did it. And that I try to keep that in my day-to-day too.
Thank you. Sarah, what about you?
Yeah, I'm also lucky to have some really strong women in my family who have broken the mold. But somebody that I think everybody is probably familiar with is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. As an HR person, a lot of her life's work is really relevant to what I do and work on every day. And really, we know a lot about her from a women's equality perspective, but really she worked on equality for everyone in all areas of life. And I just think that's so important. And I also really admire, one of her most famous quotes really emphasizes something that I think is important for leadership in any capacity. And that quote is, fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. And I just think that's something really important to keep in mind, and that will help us on our journey to make sure that everyone has equal rights one day.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. And Kelsey, what about you?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time thinking about, this particular question. And, definitely Will was a big part of my journey. And so I'd shared some of my personal background. I was in and out of foster care a little bit. I didn't really have a female role model. And when I was a young teenager, who I call mom and grandma, really helped sculpt my life. They helped give me a reason to be proud and, just keep pushing forward. So personally, I would say cliche, adopted mom and grandma, but then professionally, and I'm being very transparent, not just because we're on this panel, but, Colleen, who's actually on this panel right now. And I mean that. I was a young teenager, had went out to a Charlotte location and helped, I guess you'd say kind of onboard a condor site. And, she had called me personally and was like, hey, thank you for, everything that you've done. Starting as a young professional in the workplace, that was, a very big challenge for me. And kind of like you've heard some of the others say, you sometimes think, well, I'm too young, I'm not going to be able to do this. And that was just super inspiring for me. And then I've had the opportunity to continue to, work with her and hear her and learn from her. So I would say I have kind of two paths there, both personal and professional.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelsey. And, not to get too into, but I remember watching, you talk about your journey, and there was not like one dry eye during that presentation. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. A lot of people were definitely in their feelings watching that. So, I'm going to check the comments because we are getting some audience comments, and a lot of them are saying that the women on this panel are some of their, inspiration. So that's being repeated, and I have to echo that. I mean, I'm inspired by all of you as well. So thank you all for sharing that. All right. So the next question, and this will be our last question. How can leaders work to empower women and make the workplace more equitable? So Kelsey, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, growing up as a younger leader, I really had to develop my own skill set. And I think part of what helped me be successful and do that was creating my own voice. And so for leaders to be able to help make the workplace more equitable, it's important to be able to help others find their voice, help others feel confident, help others really understand that you can make your own path, you can make your own journey. And it doesn't matter what you look like or where you come from or really what your background is. And so I would say, from a leadership standpoint, identify that everybody has a strength and help them really see the light in that, because not everybody realizes that they have that strength. We hope that future leaders will know that and they'll work on themselves. But sometimes it takes us as leaders to truly help them see that and help develop and really set them up for success, giving them a stage, giving them a spotlight. You know, my number one goal, and I've told people this, is to be inspirational and help that next generation of women leaders and really all leaders find their spot in this world. And so I would say that's how to make the workplace more equitable.
All right. Thank you, Kelsey. And Sarah, what about you?
So I think one of the things that we can do as leaders is to work hard to help other people identify their unconscious bias and work to discover your own unconscious bias as well. And I know that's really hard. Everyone's like, well, it's unconscious. How am I supposed to know? But there's ways to discover that. And I think that it's important that we all work on that. For example, I know one of the things that I've heard at different points in my career might be a manager, and maybe even a female manager, talking about a role that they're hiring for and making assumptions that maybe certain types of people like women might not be interested in something because they have, you know, really intense caregiver obligations and things like that. But then when you highlight to people how those types of assumptions can hold women back, I feel like that's a step in making managers start to become aware of those biases and take considerations of those non-work related items out of the picture. So that's one way we can work toward gender equity, along with what other women on the panel have mentioned throughout our conversation. But I think another important step is mentorship, really at any level. You know, showing someone else the path to success is really one of the best and one of the most rewarding things that I think we can do that contributes to more equity overall.
Thank you, Sarah. And Ebony, I'll pose the same question to you. What can leaders do to empower women in the workplace and make it more equitable?
Yeah, I think Kelsey and Sarah have hit on some really great points, really helping women have a voice, creating the space for them to be able to take on more opportunities, help them be a champion for their own career. One of the times I really count as a turning point in my career, I had a leader who basically helped me write a proposal to the executive suite for a new position that didn't exist before. So things like that, mentorship for sure is very important. And I take it a step further to say sponsorship as well, not only just mentoring women, but really sponsoring them and helping to open the doors that may not otherwise be open.
Thank you, Ebony. And Colleen, how can you close this out for us?
I think expanding on what Ebony said about sponsorship, and I was thinking a lot about this today. You know, I don't know if you are all familiar with Abby Wambach, but she gave this like fantastic commencement speech a long time ago. And one of her key tips was about, you know, women oftentimes feel that there's scarcity. So when you get to the top or you get that seat at the table, because there's so few seats for women, you kind of protect it and you don't bring others along with you. You don't bring women along. And instead we need to take that, you know, there isn't scarcity. We have to create our places at the table, and we need to, once we get a seat at the table, pull up another seat and make sure that we give that seat to a woman. And so it's really about sponsorship, but it's also about not feeling like you're pitted against each other because there's so few spots for women. Instead, it's our job, especially as a senior vice president, a vice president, to create those positions for women and pull them into those positions. And so, you know, I think you have to be very pointed. I think creating an environment here like we have in Women in Leadership and being very purposeful in looking at our metrics and saying, you know, here's how many women leaders we have in each department and here's what we'd like to get to, and being very strategic to pull people up instead of pitting women against each other, which in the past was a thing. And so, you know, I think as a good leader, you need to look around and see how many women are at the table with you and make sure that you make a change to that.
Yeah, that's super important, Colleen. And, you know, I want to thank my supervisor, Rebecca. She's done such a great job of making space for me. And that's what I love about TTEC is that it is women empowering other women and leaders in general, just making sure that there's space for everyone. And the mentorship part, that's huge. I have a great mentor as well. So definitely agree with you all there. Thank you all so much. You are all so inspirational, and really appreciate you all taking the time to celebrate with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's all the time we have for today. But before we go, I want to thank the Women in Leadership team at TTEC for everything that they did, all of their support to really make today happen. I highly encourage our TTEC colleagues around the world to join their local chapter. There's a Women in Leadership group everywhere, so please check that out. And then in addition to that, I want to encourage you all to check out our blogs. We had a couple of blogs in celebration of Women's Equality Day, both on ttecjobs.com and ttec.com, and that was written by Sarah Cantor. And lastly, we hope you'll visit our social media channels to see how TTEC is celebrating today and for inspiration on how you can celebrate Women's Equality Day too. That's it for me. Thanks for joining us.